Picture this. Thousands of years ago, ancient storytellers gathered around flickering fires, weaving tales of gods who could be in multiple places at once, of warriors who existed in several realities simultaneously, and of cosmic forces so bizarre they defied all logic. Fast forward to today, and our most brilliant physicists are describing a universe that sounds eerily similar to those ancient myths. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe our ancestors stumbled onto something profound about the nature of reality itself. What if I told you that the Hindu concept of Brahma multiple universes predicted the multiverse theory by millennia? That Norse mythology's description of interconnected realms mirrors quantum entanglement? And that ancient Egyptian beliefs about consciousness surviving death align perfectly with theories about quantum information transfer? By the end of this exploration, you'll discover how myths from every corner of the world seem to echo the strangest discoveries of modern quantum physics. But here's where it gets really wild. We're not just talking about vague similarities here, we're diving deep into specific parallels that will make your brain do backflips. I've spent months researching this connection, diving through ancient texts, consulting with physicists, and what I've found is mind-blowing. These aren't just random coincidences or wishful thinking. There are systematic patterns that suggest our ancestors might have intuited fundamental truths about reality that we're only now beginning to understand scientifically. Let's start with the most shocking example. In ancient Hindu cosmology, there's this concept called Maya, which describes reality as a kind of cosmic illusion where what we perceive isn't actually real. Sound familiar? Because that's essentially what quantum mechanics tells us about the universe. At the quantum level, particles don't have definite positions or properties until they're observed. They exist in what physicists call superposition, a state of all possibilities at once. The Vedic texts, written thousands of years ago, describe reality as fundamentally uncertain and dependent on the observer. That's quantum observation theory in a nutshell, but it gets even stranger. The ancient Greeks had this philosopher named Democritus who proposed that everything was made of tiny, indivisible particles called atoms. But here's the kicker. He also suggested that these atoms could somehow influence each other across vast distances without any physical connection. Modern physicists discovered quantum entanglement only in the 20th century. Yet Democritus was describing something remarkably similar over 2,000 years earlier. The Aboriginal Australians have this concept called the dream time, where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. Time isn't linear, but rather a web where everything is interconnected. Guess what quantum physicists discovered? Time dilation, where time literally moves at different rates depending on your frame of reference. Einstein showed us that simultaneity is relative, and quantum mechanics suggests that cause and effect can actually flow backwards through time in certain circumstances. Now let's talk about the Norse mythology that absolutely blew my mind. The Vikings described 9 interconnected realms connected by Yggdrasil, the world tree. These realms could influence each other instantly, regardless of the distance between them. When something happened in one realm, it could immediately affect another realm without any apparent mechanism for that connection. This sounds exactly like quantum entanglement, where particles become correlated in such a way that measuring one instantly affects the other, no matter how far apart they are. The ancient Chinese developed the concept of yin and yang, describing reality as fundamentally dualistic yet unified. But they took it further than just opposites. They described how particles of yin exist within yang, and particles of yang exist within yin. Quantum mechanics reveals that particles can indeed exist in dual states simultaneously, exhibiting both wave and particle properties depending on how they're observed. The Chinese were describing wave-particle duality thousands of years before we had the technology to detect it. Here's where things get really trippy. Mayan mythology describes time as cyclical rather than linear, with multiple timelines existing simultaneously. The Mayans believed that skilled shamans could access these different timelines and observe alternative versions of events. Quantum mechanics suggests that all possible outcomes of any quantum event actually occur simultaneously in parallel universes. The many worlds interpretation of quantum theory splits, proposes that every quantum measurement reality into multiple branches, each containing outcome. But wait, there's more. The ancient Egyptians believed in something called the Ka, a spiritual double that could exist independently of the physical body. This Ka could be in multiple places at once and could influence physical reality through intention alone. Quantum consciousness theories propose that consciousness might operate at the quantum level, potentially existing in superposition states and influencing physical reality through observation. Celtic mythology describes the other world, a realm that exists parallel to our physical world but operates by completely different rules. Time moves differently there, distance has no meaning, and beings can shapeshift between multiple forms simultaneously. This sounds remarkably like descriptions of higher dimensional spaces in string theory, where the normal rules of physics break down and particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously. The indigenous peoples of the Americas developed sophisticated understanding of what they called the web of life, describing how all things in existence are interconnected through invisible threads of energy. When something happens to one part of the web, it instantly affects the entire network. This is essentially a description of quantum field theory, where particles are understood as excitations in underlying energy fields that permeate all of space. Ancient Indian texts describe something called Akasha, a fundamental substance that underlies all of reality and stores information about everything that has ever happened. Modern physicists theorize about the quantum vacuum, a field that underlies all of space and potentially contains information about every quantum event that has ever occurred. Some theories suggest this quantum information is preserved permanently, creating a kind of cosmic memory bank. Ved concepts Sufi mystics develop about the nature of reality that sound eerily similar to quantum superposition. They described how the divine essence exists in all possible states simultaneously until it manifests in physical reality through divine observation. They taught that reality is fundamentally uncertain and that the act of spiritual observation literally creates the world we experience. Here's what really gets me thinking. These ancient cultures didn't have particle accelerators or sophisticated mathematics. They didn't have the tools to directly observe quantum phenomena. Yet somehow they developed elaborate mythologies that seem to perfectly describe the weirdest aspects of quantum reality. How is this possible? Some researchers suggest that human consciousness might naturally operate at quantum scales, allowing our ancestors to intuitively grasp these fundamental principles through direct experience rather than intellectual analysis. Others propose that these myths represent collective memories of advanced ancient civilizations that had sophisticated understanding of physics. But there's another possibility that's even more intriguing. What if these myths aren't just describing physics? What if they're describing something even more fundamental about the nature of reality itself? What if consciousness and physical reality are so intimately connected at the quantum level that ancient mystics could directly perceive these connections through altered states of consciousness? The implications are staggering. If ancient myths really do contain accurate descriptions of quantum phenomena, then we might need to completely reconsider our understanding of both ancient wisdom and modern physics. We might discover that the boundary between science and spirituality is far more blurred than we ever imagined. But before we dive deeper into these mind-bending connections, we need to examine the most compelling evidence, because what I'm about to show you will challenge everything you think you know about the relationship between ancient wisdom and cutting-edge science. The parallels we've explored so far are just the beginning of a mystery that goes far deeper than anyone suspected. The ancient Vedic texts describe something called Indra's net, a cosmic web where each intersection contains a jewel that reflects all the other jewels throughout the entire network. When light hits one jewel, it instantly illuminates every other jewel across infinite space. Scientists studying quantum field fluctuations have discovered that empty space isn't actually empty at all. It's filled with a seething ocean of virtual particles that pop in and out of existence, creating an interconnected web of energy that links every point in the universe. The parallels are so precise it's almost unsettling. Aboriginal Dreamtime stories speak of ancestor spirits who could walk between worlds, existing simultaneously in multiple realities while maintaining their essential identity. These spirits weren't bound by the limitations of physical form and could influence events across vast distances through their mere presence. Quantum tunneling allows particles to pass through barriers that should be impossible to cross, essentially allowing them to exist on both sides of an obstacle simultaneously. The mathematics behind this phenomenon would have seemed like pure magic to ancient peoples, yet their stories describe exactly this kind of reality-bending behavior. The Tibetan concept of bardo describes intermediate states between death and rebirth, where consciousness exists in a liminal space, experiencing all possibilities simultaneously until it collapses into a specific rebirth. During these bardo states, time becomes fluid and the normal rules of causality break down. Quantum decoherence theory explains how quantum systems transition from states of infinite possibility into classical definite states through interaction with their environment. The process happens gradually, creating intermediate states where quantum and classical behaviors coexist. Ancient Persian Zoroastrian texts describe reality as a cosmic battle between order and chaos, where the outcome remains undetermined until the moment of observation. They believed that human consciousness played a crucial role in determining which force would triumph in any given situation. The Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics suggests that quantum systems exist in superposition until observed, at which point the wave function collapses into a definite state. The observer literally determines reality through the act of measurement. Here's where things get absolutely mind-melting. Amazonian shamans describe ayahuasca visions where they can perceive the molecular structure of plants and understand their healing properties without any formal chemical training. They claim to directly communicate with plant spirits that reveal the quantum-level interactions between different compounds. Modern research into plant alkaloids has confirmed that many traditional medicines work precisely through the molecular mechanisms described in these ancient visions. The Dogon people of Mali possessed incredibly detailed knowledge about the star system Sirius, including information about its invisible companion star that wasn't discovered by Western astronomers until the 20th century. They described Sirius B as incredibly dense, made of materials heavier than anything on Earth, and following a precise orbital pattern. Modern astrophysics confirms that Sirius B is indeed a white dwarf star with exactly the properties the Dogon described centuries earlier. Celtic Druids taught that reality consists of multiple overlapping dimensions that occasionally bleed through into our world. They described thin places where these dimensional boundaries become permeable, allowing beings and information to pass between realms. String theory proposes that our universe exists in 11 dimensions, with most of them curled up so tightly we can't perceive them directly. Occasionally, these extra dimensions might interact with our three-dimensional world in ways that could appear magical or supernatural. Ancient Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki as beings who could manipulate matter at its most fundamental level, transforming base elements into precious materials through their advanced understanding of atomic structure. They supposedly taught humans about metallurgy and chemistry by revealing the hidden connections between different elements. The periodic table shows us that elements can indeed be transformed into one another through nuclear reactions, and modern particle physics reveals the deep symmetries that connect all matter at the quantum level. The Hindu concept of Kali Yuga describes our current age as one where time moves faster, and reality becomes increasingly fragmented and chaotic. Ancient texts suggest that during previous ages, time moved more slowly and consciousness operated at higher frequencies. Relativity theory shows us that time is indeed relative and can flow at different rates depending on gravitational fields and velocity. Some theories in cosmology suggest that time itself might be accelerating as the universe expands. Mayan calendar systems incorporated multiple overlapping time cycles that operated simultaneously, creating complex patterns of temporal resonance. They understood that different scales of time could influence each other in non-linear ways, with small events and fast cycles affecting large patterns in slow cycles. Quantum mechanics reveals similar temporal complexities, where quantum events can influence their own past through retrocausality, and where the flow of time becomes ambiguous at the Planck scale. What's truly extraordinary is how these ancient descriptions often include specific details that match modern scientific discoveries with uncanny precision. It's not just that they're metaphorically similar, they're describing the same phenomena using different language and conceptual frameworks. The mathematical equations that govern quantum entanglement could be translated directly into the mythological language of interconnected cosmic webs and divine communication networks. But here's the real kicker that keeps me awake at night. If these myths really are accurate descriptions of quantum phenomena, then we have to ask ourselves, how did ancient peoples gain access to this information? The most unsettling possibility is that consciousness itself operates according to quantum principles, allowing direct perception of these fundamental aspects of reality under certain conditions. Recent research in quantum biology has discovered that quantum effects play crucial roles in photosynthesis, bird navigation, and even human olfaction. Our brains might be quantum computers operating at body temperature, processing information through quantum coherence and entanglement. If consciousness really does work this way, then altered states of consciousness might allow direct perception of quantum phenomena. This would explain why so many mystical traditions developed similar insights about the nature of reality despite being separated by thousands of miles and centuries of time. They weren't making up stories or engaging in wishful thinking. They were reporting direct observations of quantum reality accessed through expanded states of consciousness. The implications are staggering because they suggest that the separation between objective science and subjective spiritual experience might be completely artificial. What we call mythology might actually be humanity's earliest scientific observations, recorded in the only language available at the time. And what we call modern physics might be rediscovering truths that our ancestors knew intimately through direct experience. So what does this all mean for us today? We've journeyed through thousands of years of human wisdom and discovered that our ancestors weren't just telling bedtime stories around those ancient fires. They were documenting their direct encounters with the deepest mysteries of existence itself. From Hindu concepts of cosmic illusion to Norse descriptions of interconnected realms, from Aboriginal Dreamtime to Mayan parallel timelines, these myths consistently describe the same bizarre quantum phenomena that our most advanced physics is only now beginning to understand. The evidence is overwhelming. These aren't coincidences or creative interpretations. We're looking at systematic patterns that suggest human consciousness has always had the potential to perceive quantum reality directly. Whether through altered states, mystical experiences, or some unknown mechanism, our ancestors tapped into fundamental truths about the universe that we've spent centuries trying to rediscover through technology and mathematics. This revelation changes everything. It means the boundary between science and spirituality, between objective reality and subjective experience, might be far more fluid than we ever imagined. It suggests that ancient wisdom traditions weren't primitive superstitions, but sophisticated explorations of consciousness and reality that rival our modern scientific achievements. Perhaps the real question isn't why ancient myths sound like quantum theory. Maybe the question is why it took us so long to remember what we once knew. The universe has been whispering its secrets to humanity for millennia. We're finally learning to listen again.